On a quiet summer Sunday, when church bells were still echoing across Europe, destiny chose a battlefield. Not a grand capital, not a legendary fortress, not even a famous river, just a dusty road near a tiny village called Bouvines. And yet this single day would break empires, crown kings, rewrite borders, and shape Europe for centuries. One battle, 4 rulers, thousands of knights, a continent on the edge of collapse. This is the story of the day medieval Europe almost destroyed itself. The year was 1214, and power was about to change hands in blood. The 13th century was not a peaceful age. It was an age of crowns, steel, and betrayal. Every kingdom in Western Europe was a chess piece, every noble family a military faction, every border a wound waiting to reopen. France was rising. England was furious. The Holy Roman Empire was fractured. And Flanders was ready to burn. In the center of it all stood King Philip II of France, known as Philip Augustus, a ruler who transformed medieval France from a divided feudal realm into a centralized and aggressive superpower. But power is never gained without enemies, and Philip had many. By 1214, Philip had achieved what no French king before him had done. He crushed internal rebellions, weakened the great feudal lords, and most importantly, he tore Normandy from the English crown. Lands that had belonged to English kings for generations were now under French banners. To Philip, this was justice. To his enemies, it was theft. The man who felt this humiliation most deeply was King John of England, later remembered as John Lackland. Not because he had no land, but because he had lost almost everything that had been left to him. Normandy, Anjou, Touraine, Maine, all taken by Philip's armies and political pressure. The English nobility despised him for this. Chroniclers mocked him. His own barons doubted him. But in 1214, John saw one last chance to restore his honor and his empire. Since he could not defeat Philip alone, he did what desperate kings have always done. He gathered allies. He built a dangerous coalition against France, a grand plan to crush Philip from 2 directions at once. King John would attack France from the south, while the Holy Roman Emperor Otto IV would invade from the north. Alongside Otto marched Count Ferrand of Flanders and Count Renaud of Boulogne, powerful lords who hated Philip's growing control and feared the expansion of French royal power into their lands. This was not just a war. It was a coordinated attempt to destroy the future of France as a centralized kingdom and return it to a divided feudal patchwork of rival lords. The plan was simple and brutal: trap Philip between 2 armies, shatter his forces, and then divide his realm among the victors. But war never respects plans. Not even royal ones. Philip Augustus knew he was the target. His spies warned him. His messengers arrived exhausted, covered in dust. His advisors suggested caution. Retreat to Paris. Avoid open battle. Negotiate. But Philip did not retreat. He chose confrontation. He marched north, toward Flanders, directly into the heart of the enemy coalition. He gathered an army of around 7,000 men. Not the largest force in Europe, but disciplined, loyal, and hardened by years of campaigns. Over 1,000 mounted knights, supported by infantry, crossbowmen, and militias from cities loyal to the French crown. This was not a feudal mob thrown together in panic. This was a royal army, organized and shaped by Philip's long rule. On July 27, 1214, Philip's army moved near the small village of Bouvines. He had just crossed the river Mark and believed the enemy forces were still some distance away. But intelligence was imperfect in the medieval world, and Philip's assumption was wrong. Otto's massive coalition army was closer than expected. Much closer. As Philip's men were still organizing their march and preparing for rest, word arrived: the enemy was approaching fast from behind. There would be no safe retreat, no time to escape. If Philip tried to move, his army would be attacked while scattered and vulnerable. So he did the only thing a king in this position could do. He turned his army around. On that narrow stretch of land near Bouvines, under a wide open summer sky, Philip Augustus decided to fight. Not castle walls, not defensive trenches, but open field, open ground, open death. And what makes this moment even more shocking, it was Sunday, a holy day, a day meant for prayer, rest, and worship. But when power, pride, and kingdoms are on the line, even God is forced to watch in silence. The field of Bouvines itself was nothing special. No dramatic hills, no great rivers, just flat farmland and narrow roads. But that flat land meant one thing: cavalry. This would not be a siege, not a slow war. This would be a violent, thunderous clash of mounted knights, armored horsemen charging into lines of steel, wood, and flesh. As both armies formed up, silence fell over the field. Horses stamped the ground. Metal armor creaked with every movement. Banners rose into the air, the golden lilies of France, the imperial eagle of the Holy Roman Empire, the lion of Flanders, and the symbols of English power flying behind the coalition. Two armies, facing each other across a narrow plain. Thousands of men aware that within hours, their world would be different. Some would die. Some would fall into history. Some would become legends. And some would decide the fate of Europe. The air over the field of Bouvines felt heavy, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Thousands of men stood in silence, facing one another across the low farmland. The sun was already moving westward, casting long shadows across armor and shields. Dust lingered above the ground from marching feet and nervous horses. You could hear metal, leather, breathing, whispers of last prayers, the rattling of spears, the short commands of officers trying to maintain order. King Philip stood among his household knights, not hidden behind walls or distant from danger, but on the front of the battlefield. His banner, the golden fleur-de-lis on blue, was raised above him. Across the field, the immense coalition army of Emperor Otto IV stretched wide and deep, its lines larger, denser, and on paper, stronger. Both sides understood something terrible. This battle would not be decided by clever maneuvering, but by direct, merciless collision. The signal was given. The first movement came not from the knights, but from the infantry and crossbowmen. French sergeants and militia pushed forward, arrows and bolts tearing through the air. Crossbow strings snapped. Arrows hissed like insects of death. Shields raised across the field. The first men fell, not nobles, not kings, but common soldiers whose names would never be written, only their blood soaking into the soil of northern France. But this was only the beginning, because now the cavalry began to move. Thousands of hooves struck the earth at once. It started as a tremor, then a vibration, then like thunder rolling through the ground. Knights lowered their lances. Helmets closed. Visors snapped down. Horses surged forward. On the French right wing, the knights under Duke Eudes of Burgundy charged directly into the Flemish forces. The clash was savage. Shields shattered. Lances splintered. Horses collided with horses. Men were thrown, crushed, pierced, dragged beneath hooves. The Flemish infantry fought desperately, stabbing at the legs of the charging horses, trying to break their momentum. For a moment, the right wing seemed balanced. No side gaining ground. Just chaos. Steel against steel. Cries. Blood. Then, in the center, the true heart of the battle ignited. Philip's royal division moved forward against the imperial center of Otto IV. This was where history waited. The charge was not elegant. It was violent. Thousands of armored men smashed into each other with such force that horses screamed and fell instantly. The shockwave echoed across the field. Lances broke like dry wood. Swords came out. Maces rose. Axes fell. Men fought face to face, inches apart, their breath fogging inside their helmets. Their vision dimmed by sweat, blood, and dust. Some knights fought on horseback. Others fought on foot, dismounted, surrounded. Philip, the King of France, was right there. He did not stay behind the lines. He rode directly into the thickest fighting. And in one of the most dramatic moments of the battle, his horse was killed beneath him. For a brief second, the King of France lay on the ground, helpless, in the chaos. Enemy knights immediately realized it. They surged toward him. If Philip died here, France would collapse. His downfall in this moment would be unstoppable. Swords swung. Spears thrust. German knights tried to reach him. One chronicler later wrote that the world itself seemed to lean forward in that moment. But his household knights reacted instantly. They surrounded him. They formed a living wall. They dragged him back up. Someone brought him another horse. And Philip mounted again. Alive. Unbroken. Still fighting. And there's something important here. His men saw it. They saw their king fall. And rise. They saw him almost captured. And saved. And the effect was electric. French knights roared. Their attacks grew more vicious. Because now this was not just about land. This was about their king. Meanwhile, the imperial center was under enormous strain. Otto IV fought bravely, but his position was becoming dangerous. His knights were being isolated, separated, surrounded. Communication was breaking down. The noise of combat was deafening. No orders could be heard clearly anymore. Only individual instincts remained. On the French left wing, another brutal struggle unfolded. There, the French forces faced Count Renaud of Boulogne and his trained infantry formations. Renaud had organized his troops into a tight defensive square, bristling with spears, designed to resist cavalry charges. French knights slammed into this living barrier again and again. Horses impaled. Riders pulled down. Spears snapped. Men crushed. But the square held. For a while. It became one of the most desperate and bloody points of the entire battle. The French tried to break it. The men of Boulogne refused to break. Bodies piled up around that formation like a wall of death. Hours passed. The field became slippery. Armored bodies lay everywhere. Some still moving. Some screaming. Some silent. Horses wandered riderless, driven mad by pain. And still, neither side fully broke. Until suddenly, on the French right wing, the momentum shifted. The Flemish forces began to weaken. Their formation loosened. Some units began to retreat. Not run, just fall back. But in medieval battle, even a step backward could destroy morale. The French pressed harder, heavier, faster, relentless. Count Ferrand of Flanders, one of the key enemy leaders, was eventually unhorsed and captured during this phase. His fall sent a wave of panic through the Flemish lines. Without him, command dissolved. And now the imperial coalition felt it. The chains started to break. In the center, Otto IV tried to hold his ground. He was still fighting, still visible, still alive. But the noose was tightening around him. French knights focused on him, pushing hard, cutting into his guard, breaking his formation. Then came a critical moment. A group of French knights broke through. They reached Otto. They struck his horse. The imperial banner fell. Otto was pulled away by his men before he could be captured, but he was effectively forced out of the battle. His bodyguards carried him from the field, retreating fast, disappearing from the fight. The moment his imperial standard vanished, his men knew. The emperor had left. Panic spread. A battle can survive wounds. It cannot survive the loss of its heart. What followed was not a fight. It was a collapse. Some units tried to hold. Others broke completely. The infantry of Boulogne, still locked in their square, became isolated. Surrounded by French forces from all directions, they fought like trapped animals. But they were overwhelmed, crushed, forced into submission. Count Renaud was captured. Flemish forces scattered. German knights fled. The coalition army disintegrated. The field of Bouvines belonged to France. Philip Augustus remained standing, still mounted, still alive, covered in dust and sweat and victory. Around him, the battlefield was unrecognizable, a plain of corpses, broken weapons, shattered armor, and living ghosts searching for surviving brothers and friends. And in that moment, as the sun began to sink lower, everyone there knew something profound had happened. This was not just a battle won. This was a world shifted. The Battle of Bouvines did not end when the dust settled. In many ways, it began a new chapter for Europe. For Philip Augustus, the victory was more than just military. It was a statement. France had proven it could withstand the greatest coalition of its era and emerge unbroken. The implications rippled across every court, every kingdom, and every noble household from the Channel to the Rhine. England, humiliated, faced a crisis of authority. King John had relied on his alliance with Emperor Otto IV and the rebellious lords of Flanders, expecting to divide France and reclaim lost territories. Instead, he watched from the south as his allies fell apart, one by one. The Flemish forces, once thought invincible in their disciplined infantry squares, were shattered. Count Ferrand, captured and forced to pay homage to the French king, symbolized the collapse of the coalition. Renaud of Boulogne was dragged from the battlefield in chains. The imperial army had disintegrated. Otto IV, who had placed his personal honor and claim to power on this day, was forced into a retreat that left his credibility in ruins. This single defeat had political consequences that extended far beyond the battlefield. For the Holy Roman Empire, the collapse of Otto IV's campaign weakened his grip on his vassals. The German princes began to question his leadership, and rival claimants to imperial authority quickly capitalized on his vulnerability. His reputation as a military and political leader never fully recovered. In England, The humiliation of the defeat at Bouvines compounded King John's existing unpopularity among his barons. He had returned from the continent having lost prestige, territory, and face. The seeds of rebellion, which had long simmered due to his failures and heavy taxation, began to sprout in earnest. Within 2 years, these tensions would culminate in the demands that led to the sealing of the Magna Carta in 1215. Bouvines, in effect, was not just a French victory. It was the spark that forced England to confront the limits of royal authority and baronial power. For France, the effects were immediate and profound. Philip Augustus consolidated his gains in Normandy and beyond. Towns that had wavered in loyalty now pledged themselves unequivocally to the crown. The king's ability to command both professional troops and feudal levies demonstrated the rising strength of a centralized monarchy. Nobles who had previously resisted royal authority were reminded, often through imprisonment or fines, that rebellion was costly. The social and political fabric of northern France shifted decisively. Philip's victory also enhanced his prestige across Europe. Foreign rulers recognized that he was no longer a regional king but a sovereign whose power demanded respect. His influence over vassals and allies expanded, and his court became a model of centralized medieval governance. The battle also changed military thought. The French victory demonstrated that disciplined formations, strategic deployment of cavalry and infantry, and the leadership of a king willing to fight alongside his men could overcome numerically or tactically comparable coalitions. Historians of the later medieval period often cite Bouvines as a template for combining feudal levies with professional troops to achieve decisive results. The use of heavy cavalry to punch through enemy lines, coordinated with infantry, and crossbowmen to hold positions, became a model that other European armies studied and, in some cases, replicated. The psychological impact was equally important. The sight of Philip Augustus surviving close calls, standing atop a field littered with corpses, reinforced the perception of the French king as a near-invincible leader, a symbol around which loyalty could coalesce. The political map of Europe itself was subtly redrawn. Flanders, which had been a rebellious and semi-independent region, fell into close alignment with French authority, at least temporarily. The counts and city-states that had supported the coalition had to negotiate new realities. Many were forced to pay tribute, swear oaths, or accept vassalage. The fragile alliances that had united Otto IV, John of England, and rebellious lords dissolved. Without Philip's adversaries holding together, northern France enjoyed a period of unprecedented stability. Towns expanded, trade routes were secured, and the king's tax revenues increased, allowing for further consolidation of royal power. The social consequences were also significant. Peasants and townspeople who had witnessed the chaos and destruction of the battle were left to cope with the aftermath. Devastated farmland, displaced families, and the emotional weight of seeing thousands die within a single day. Knights who survived the slaughter returned home with the prestige of having fought in a legendary battle, while those captured faced ransom, imprisonment, or, in some cases, execution. The culture of knighthood itself was reinforced by Bouvines. Bravery, loyalty to one's lord or king, and personal valor were celebrated, chronicled, and romanticized, feeding the growing narrative of chivalric honor in France and beyond. Diplomatically, the repercussions extended even further. Philip Augustus's victory discouraged other potential coalitions against France for decades. The memory of Bouvines served as both a warning and a deterrent. Kings who might have considered challenging French power reconsidered. Barons contemplating rebellion calculated the risk of facing the king who had defeated the greatest coalition Europe had yet seen. This allowed France to exert influence in regions beyond its immediate borders, shaping alliances, marriages, and treaties in a manner that reinforced royal authority without immediate recourse to war. Even religious and cultural narratives were affected. Chroniclers, poets, and clerics wrote about the battle in terms of divine favor, attributing Philip's survival and victory to God's will. The sense that a righteous king, fighting for order against chaos, could triumph on the battlefield became embedded in the collective consciousness of the French people. Stories of the battle circulated widely, inspiring loyalty and nationalism, setting a precedent for the intertwining of military success with the legitimacy of monarchy, a theme that would echo throughout later medieval Europe. In conclusion, the Battle of Bouvines was not merely a clash of arms but a transformative event. It reshaped political boundaries, elevated the French monarchy to unprecedented heights, undermined English authority and imperial ambitions, and established patterns of military organization and strategy that influenced generations. Its immediate consequences were seen in the capture of key leaders, the collapse of a powerful coalition, and the reaffirmation of French dominance in Northern Europe. Its long-term effects were equally profound: the rise of centralized royal power, the reconfiguration of European alliances, and the shaping of medieval political culture. The victory at Bouvines cemented Philip Augustus as one of the most capable rulers of his time and marked a turning point in the history of France, England, and the Holy Roman Empire. For Europe, July 27, 1214 became a day when the course of nations was irrevocably altered, a day when the fate of kings' kingdoms and empires hung on the edge of swords, lances, and the courage of men willing to fight and die for glory, honor, and survival.